So I think we've had a really lovely journey there through everybody's conversation, where we had the net zero carbon from Hawley and how you get there, and a really strong message around let's get out of files, let's liberate this data, let's use knowledge graphs, let's use ontologies, let's automate this whole industry. We had Ray talking to us about standards and the importance of standardization and what's out there available in terms of grants. And we had Robyn telling us about Kobe and the importance of classifying your maintainable assets. And then finally, Alice talking to us about what you can do with that data once you have it classified, once you put it in the hands of owners. So I'd like to open the floor. This is a panel discussion, but I'd like to open the floor for any questions. Does anybody in the audience have a question? Oh, we have one here. There's a roving mic here. Here at the front, sorry, just at the front. If you just introduce yourself so we know who you are, that'd be fantastic. All right. That's me told. Thank you. Oh, and guys. Yeah, I think you just talk. I think you just talk. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the great presentations. I'm Bimal Patwari. I am the CEO and the founder of Pinnacle Infotech. We provide BIM services globally. So my question to you, Alice, very nice presentation. You know, it's great that assets that you showed and you know how you have created the documentation and records for that. Now, what about the connections between the assets? Suppose I have a valve, right? And suppose that valve controls the water supply to a certain area. So how do I show, like for my repair, for my maintenance, suppose suddenly the water is dripping down from the ceiling in an airport arrival terminal. So how do I know which valve to close?
Alice, you just talk.
Great. Thank you for the question. It's one that's come up often, and I'm not sure if many of you have heard of the one that occurred at a hospital in, I believe it was Arkansas. That very thing happened. For us, that is obviously a sensor-based element, and it also is a system-based. So we try to track those systems, that piping system that might be in a ceiling, whether it's a water or an electrical circuit. We want to track that in our systems panel so that they can see that. If there's a leak that's occurring, that's what's going to trigger that alert for us, if that makes sense.
True, but then an airport could have 10,000 valves or more than that, right? So when you have the LOD 500 BIM model, so you already have all the connections, everything is detailed there, right? So you know that if there is a fire, alarm, then there are 10 things that happen in the building, right? The generator will start, all the doors will open up, and 10 things. So it's very important for our FM-based solutions to integrate, because we are working on airport and we are developing, we are integrating now Maximo with the BIM 360 model. So I want to understand from you, like you have great experiences. So how much successful we have been in doing that? Because the real test is, because you don't know where the water will leak, and what source of water it could be. If the water is leaking, there could be 3 types of waters at least in any area. So you actually need that intelligent BIM model, because that has all the information.
Yeah, so.
Sorry, I was going to say, do you think you need that in the BIM model, or can it be in the database? Because we're very database-centric. So that systems and those circuits and those warnings are happening in the database side. We can visualize it in the model, but we want to see it from the database. We want to see that circuit. We want to see that system that's going to have those alarms and alerts on them, which is going to be, I believe, a quicker way to identify a location instead of trying to find it in a model.
So how many alarms you'll put? It is impossible. Like theoretically, it is not possible. Suppose you just take a hospital, not even an airport, right? There are thousands of pipes and the fittings and valves and things like that, right? So, there are 2 things according to my experience. See, one is an alarm tracking the performance of the equipment. Suppose I have a pump. I put an IoT device on that, and it gives me a continuous information on the temperature, the vibration, the pressure of that pump, and it tells me the health of the pump, right? That you can do for the critical equipments. But for general layout of the complete MEP layout of any utility, any area, I think the solution, again, I wanted to know your experiences, that how do you handle that?
So it's still by system for us. I understand what you're saying. You're saying that it's such a complex model at a hospital or an airport, and it actually recently happened at Denver International. A leak was occurring for multiple days. It's under construction, so they didn't have anything in place to say, hey, something's leaking, no alert. They didn't find it till days later, and when the water was coming into the public space. And that's now been addressed. But when that's all done, we still track it by a system, whether that's from that pump to a specific endpoint. We're going to track that piece as opposed to worrying about the entire MEP world of that building, right? You really do have to break it down to that pump, to a valve, to a temperature gauge, as opposed to, well, this is a really big system. How are we going to find it? Hopefully, and of course this is never perfect, but hopefully we've structured our database well enough and our systems and sensors to understand and be able to map that out. Can I say it's going to be perfect? No. That's like saying there's no perfect set of drawings, right? I don't even look at models as an LOD 500. It's more of, is it representational of what exists in space? Then let's track that, and let's track a system, and let's track an asset. So we're doing it by system type, whether that's a chilled water system, a domestic water supply, or even a compressed air system. We're tracking that each by system, by endpoint to endpoint, and the valves and gauges in between is how we're doing it.
What database you are using? You're using the Revit database, or you have your own database?
We build our databases primarily in SQL. So we're living in a SQL database. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have experience of this type of thing. So we have a platform-based approach, so not a database, but a platform, and we use in Invocar at the minute, we're using rules, fault detection rules. So if you have the right intelligence, and we're a software company, so we need to partner with engineers that understand the systems in play and the equipment in play, and then we can write rules that will tell us when things are going wrong. So in my past, we had a rule that alerted to say that there was a problem with a variable frequency drive, and when the maintenance team went down, but the BMS said everything was fine, but there was something wrong with this variable frequency drive. And when the engineers went down, they were like, I cannot see what's going on. When they investigated further, because they knew there was a problem, because the data was telling them there is a problem here, find it, they found there was a massive hole in the ductwork. So yes, the output was perfect. The BMS was saying the room temperature, everything is perfect, but the equipment was running overtime to deliver that. So the data told them that there was a problem, and it's a data approach. So your BIM model is brilliant for your objects, for your graphical interface. It's not going to cut it for that kind of use case.
You're very right. See, I was just sharing some experiences. I was with the head of the maintenance in a very, very busy airport. And I told him, look, my friend, if the water leaks from here, how much time will you need to stop this water? Yeah. You know what was the answer? How much do you think, if the water leaks, right, how much time they will take to stop that water?
Well, if they have a digital twin, they'll be able to identify the system that leak is part of and be able to turn off the isolation valve. Should take them like the time it takes to get from your desk to the valve.
Can I just jump in there? Because these systems are only as good as the quality of the data that you're dealing with.
100%.
I mean, if you don't have enough sensors, the BMS system can do nothing about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't have, when you could have, actually, if you've got an infinite number of sensors, you've got a very, very complex data. You've got a very, very complex system. But if you don't have breach sensors, for example, on every few inches of a pipe, it's not going to tell you exactly where the pipe breach occurs. But what you can do is you can measure pressure loss in a system. You say there's some leak, you know. You can measure levels, so you know what piping system is affected. Is it cooling water? Is it potable water? All of that can be identified. But if you don't have infinite sensing, you don't have infinite data.
True. So what? Sure.
Thank you so much for taking offline. Thank you so much.
Hi, Conor Shaw from University College Dublin, just up the road. It's a lovely campus if you want to visit. Or if you want any other recommendations for your next couple of days here, just say hi. Just a comment to that last one. I've also been working with an airport, I won't mention which one, a very large one that considers itself quite the digital twin example, and I can tell you it's not. And, you know, data quality is a massive one. And what I can say is, for example, a lot of FMs are having to take over and do a zero measure. And that was the case where I'm working.
Yeah.
Fortunately, COVID was actually quite convenient for zero measures because they could do that. They had a lot of time to check what they have.
Yeah.
But I think, sorry, names, Robyn's, I think that's a really interesting one, is the cross-checking of Kobe. I mean, it's absolutely needed. That's one thing. A question kind of to Robyn and to Alice, and I'm sorry, I missed Ray's talk, but I missed your talk. I'll get the slides. But Robyn and Alice, I really like the work. But it seems quite centralized. The approaches are quite centralized. And I'm wondering, do you see, which is perfectly fine, and especially when we're talking about behind firewalls and on sites and stuff like that. But do you see that there could be a possibility for more distribution with your approaches as well? And I'm sure Ray maybe covered parts of this, but federating data, not necessarily having everything in the same place. And yeah, just where do you see that with your two parts? And that's open to anyone, thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one for Tom as well.
So, sorry, so I understand the question correctly. You're talking about federating the data itself?
Yeah, well, I'm just talking about maybe not relying on bringing everything into necessarily one place, but rather linking to federated data and things like that. And I think that's quite a hot topic at the moment, and realizing that, you know, we all had this idea 10, 15 years ago that the BIM was going to hold everything, and that's quite clearly not the case and shouldn't be the case. And I'm just wondering, those two examples, like, would there be the possibility for that federation? You were talking about there was APIs linking into your own Alice. Would that be,
So it's an interesting question. So the federation of the data, in my world, owner data and the environment are two different things for us. So our database structure and how we've architected that, or an API integration, we can share that across client sites. But obviously the data itself is client owner specific. So we don't share that. I know there's a lot of talk about open BIM. Open BIM is okay if you're sharing APIs or an SDK or a GitHub, what you were showing on Kobe, Sweet Ohm. I love that. That, to me, would be your definition of an open BIM. Sharing an owner interface, not open BIM. The owner has paid a lot of money for that, and that is not something, especially for us in our, not just healthcare, but on our semiconductor side, that is all internal, and it's not in an open BIM environment. So we can federate the way we do things, but not necessarily data across owners. Does that kind of answer where you were headed?
No, I think it's... Hello? It's working?
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's quite clear that we're not sharing owner data when we're doing open bit. We're not, you know, it's the same as using a Google Doc. Because we put something online doesn't mean that everyone has access to it. So like we're quite savvy with this kind of access and stuff like that now. I suppose I was thinking more just, I mean, my example, I'm not going to again say where it is or the airport, but they have 26 unintegrated IT systems. Yeah. And, you know, they're trying to build it up kind of bit by bit in a scalable way. And I'm wondering, in that case, you know, for example, there's the energy guys, and they don't want to have to give data to somebody, but they want somebody to be able to fetch their data. So I'm talking about leaving stuff in source, and yeah, just maybe a comment on that.
Yeah, well, an example of that would be the GaiaX project in Europe, you know, which is a federated data sharing environment, and data is key, and you cannot just give away user data. It's illegal for a start. You know, that's one reason you can't do it. So what the GaiaX system, which is this massive AI, you know, federated data sharing environment, revolves around data spaces. So you create a data space for the environment you want to work on. So it could be a data space for a building or for an airport or whatever, like, you know. And all of the vendors, you know, who have access to the shared data space the data itself resides in the vendor's location, so the environment provides the sharing. It's anonymized data, so there's no source data been breached. So you got trust, you got transparency, you got you have ethics and GDPR and the AI Act, and all of those things are being supported. So while I don't think, I'm not a BIM expert, my background is more on the technology side, so I know the frameworks exist and platforms exist where this can happen, but whether a use case of BIM and an airport using a management system like what you're talking about has happened yet, I wouldn't be aware of it actually.
Yeah.
So, but I just know the technology can support it.
I'd like Tom to jump in here, because I think you might be talking about knowledge graphs as well, about freeing up, and I don't know whether you saw Tom's talk, did you? Now you see, that's where it all went wrong. So,
Deeply offended.
And if you think about the example of, just before Tom jumps in here, social media platforms, right? They take all of our information, our data. Nobody knows whose data it is, but it's all there and it's all usable. Think about Google Maps and where that's come from and how much people use that. And data gets poured into it constantly, and it's constantly getting updated. But oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me the point is that. Firstly, there's never going to be one single data source or platform that's better than all the others. And we're not just talking digital twin platforms, but a single source of data that everyone's going to operate on, a single data environment that beats the rest, whether it's by Autodesk or Google or anyone else. And so the focus has to be on interoperability, and we hear that a lot, but it remains true. It's about not having a single master source of data, but instead being able to federate it, as you say. And I'd acknowledge, I think, also that every different player, and maybe to use the analogy that you'd have also missed from Andrew around the sort of the orchestra, everything kind of playing in concert. Everyone's got their part to play along the whole process, right? With the supply chain for a new building, but also just generally speaking to maintain and operate a building, or something as complex as an airport. Everyone's got a different lens on that data. They're looking for different insight out of it. They're adding different insight to it. So the reality of having a true knowledge graph, it's far more, it's a complex mix of interconnected systems. So we're going down the wrong path if we're thinking in terms of, right, someone's got to own all the data and give everyone who's involved direct access to that, and off they go.
Yeah.
It's more complex and yet more, I don't know what the word is actually. Yeah, it's more subtle than that, I guess.
Yeah. All right. We have another question. Thank you.
Hello?
Yeah,
Can
just
you hear
talk.
me? Yeah. It's Pedro Pascual. I'm EMEA, the digital delivery manager for Yonda Group. We are owner and operators of data centers. And talking your comment about interoperability of data and what he said about federation of data, my question is, how do you work with, Rob, is more for you in terms of COVID, how do you work with elements or components that you are not modeling in the 3D model, but are maintainable assets and have to be federated in the COVID spreadsheet? How you work with that? To all of you, whoever you want to answer.
I'll try and pick that up. Firstly, speaking as someone, again, without a deep load of industry experience, I'm still getting the hang of how on earth all of this works. But the focus we're taking, not every project we do aligns to COBE, more and more of them do. So we've gone after a graph-based approach. I mentioned knowledge graph, but also at a technical level, we're using something called Neo4j, which is a form of graph-based data organization. So it's all about nodes and their connections. And what we're trying to do is, I guess, put Revit and other authoring tools like that back in a box. Not to not use them, but to use them for what they're really good at, and not try and sort of push them into doing everything for us as the kind of core tool. So yeah, we're moving everything into a cloud-based, graph-driven data set, which again is all about individual data points that have got their attributes and they're tagged in all sorts of contexts. And we go back to different players in the mix having entirely different contexts, different lenses around the data. This sort of model gives you the flexibility for anyone who's got a part to play in the design process to append and to orientate that additional there's additional attributes of those individual design elements that are contextual to what they're offering, if that makes sense. And whilst I've got, I'm a massive Excel fan. I remember my first job being involved in healthcare, but managing dosage charts for X-ray machines across southeast of England. So I'm not sure how many people I've inadvertently irradiated over my early career. But Excel is massively powerful, and tabular data is what we're used to and familiar with. But actually, what I think is really powerful here is this shift towards a graph-based model for managing all of our data, whether that's a mental model or also a technical model. It's slightly rambly, I hope that makes sense, but yeah.
This is it. I think COBie isn't perfect. It was a structure that was supplied so that people who didn't have their own bespoke structure could use it, and that's, although people are there are definitely ways it can improve, but other people are still struggling to understand how it works in the first place. So I think it's just a starting point, and we're definitely going to be moving forward in the years to come.
I think one of the advantages of the knowledge graph is that you can have concepts that don't necessarily have to have a physical presence. So, for example, a client can say, I want spaces, but I don't know if it's going to be a building or if it's going to be underground. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not a 3D model yet.
Yeah.
And that's one of the advantages of something like a knowledge graph, is that you can have a concept.
You said it better than I could. Yeah, that's absolutely it.
I'm going to give you a link. Shout out to the Built Academy podcast. There's a great episode from Mads Holten Rasmussen and Jeroen Verbrucken that are in Ghent University, and they do a great intro to this. I'm going to give you the link to it. Sorry, thanks.
Hi, Gary Young, Southern Regional College. It's just an observation, and I was just interested to hear some of the panel members. Estates management, facilities management, you can tell I'm follically challenged, so I come from a different era. So we've had to build skill sets within our department around BIM modelling, information management, and skill sets going forward in the next number of years sounds like to me around software coding, and that's the type of skill set that estates and facilities management departments should be investing in potentially now as we start to flex and move, and in response to having digital twins that give us more information.
And add data science to that list as well.
Sorry?
Data science to that list as well. Yeah.
Okay, jump in on that. Coming from a university, so I'm just up the road from DCU, which is UCD for dyslexics. We have the part of our challenges is to provide the next generation of leaders and experts to support pretty much all of the emerging technology areas and innovation areas. But you're absolutely correct. The good thing about whether you need coding or the modeling expertise or data science, etc., is people get turned off. Say, oh no, not software. I don't understand that. It's all rocket science, etc. And is that we're uniquely and innately digital. We have 10 digits that we multiply in tens and in groups of tens, and we're logical, which is effectively what a machine computer does anyway. Just take that logic and puts a set of rules around it. So we do that automatically. We make logical decisions all the time. So coding and software and data science is not all it's cracked up to be. Anyone can pick it up at any stage.
I just add one more to that list of expertise in the area. It's the bit I was talking about, which is the interaction of people and buildings. Don't lose out on sight that we need to understand the interaction better.
Oh, yeah.
So something that we're focusing on at the moment is environmental and behavioural psychology as well, to try and better understand that link.
Can I just add? That's working. So I'll add another one. I got a little example. A couple of years ago, a very large company did a smart building right here in Ireland, and you had to sign an NDA to get into this building because it was the smartest building, right? And I won't say who it is. And I knew somebody who was lucky enough to get through the NDA process and get in to see this building. And they were having the tour, and the woman said, "Oh, you see that smart bin? Waste of money, complete waste of money. Wouldn't have a smart bin again." ever, right? And they all went, oh, why is that? She said, well, the cleaner just empties it every night, doesn't wait for the alarm. So that's another role for you, business process change. If you don't change your business processes and tell people this is the new way we're working, nothing will change. So you can throw technology, you can stick IoT sensors to the wall, you can have a digital twin, you can run analytics, you can do data science, but if you don't tell people and bring people on the journey with you, this is our new way of working, nothing will change and you will have wasted your money. Rant over, sorry. Any more questions after that little episode? All right, shall I ask them? Should we keep going, or do you want to? Are you done? Yeah, we can keep going. So I'm intrigued, right? I have a question for the panel, and anybody can put their hand up and answer this one. Do you feel that technology companies are a little bit to blame here for the kind of mess that we're in? In terms of siloed data, in terms of the questions around, are these platforms fit for purpose? Can we update them? Are they future-proof? Lots of confusion in the marketplace. What do I choose? Lots of empty databases. Lots of databases full but not used. What do we think?
I think the industry is siloed historically anyway. So I think that culture has come through. Yes, there are a lot of options and there are a lot of things that can be used, and that's why there's so many different approaches, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because we can learn hopefully from each other and everything can improve. But yeah, I think the culture of the industry needs to change itself right at the very core.
Yeah.
I'd say similar. I think are technology companies to blame? They absolutely are, but they also absolutely aren't. They've been the ones to at least nudge the industry forward where they can, but their remit's limited. If you're a small startup, and I've been in small technology startups, you're after whatever client will take on your proposition and help you develop it. I would lay the blame much more at the door of larger companies like us, like construction firms, who, it's a very risk-averse industry historically, massively so. And also, I think, as I was saying earlier, it's transactional. Everything's driven by the way we set up our contracts. And I think that has stood very actively in the way of driving new technology because it inherently involves risk. And I think whilst there is a strong desire, genuinely, I think, to collaborate across the industry, you do see it. We talk with even our competitors about how we might all actually produce better outcomes. There is still, we've created such a mountain to climb over the years. We've embedded so much different technology, different data sets, different approaches. I think actually through being too conservative and not being willing to really push the boat out and try something different together.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what's interesting is it siloed or is it being set up by use case? And as an example, Autodesk, we're just going to say it right out there, right? Autodesk creates siloed platforms. You have to pay for every module in Autodesk BIM 360 separately. If I want to collaborate in Revit, pay for it. If I want to look at the build module, pay for it. If I just want docs, that's a separate fee. If you want to use Forge APIs, you need to buy credits. So are they siloing us? Or are they saying, what's your use case? Only buy what you need. My opinion is they're siloing us. But at the same time, it's provided a door for Intimation or an Invicara or other Plannerly to go and leverage APIs, ignore those modules, and build our own. Are we adding to that problem? I don't know. But it's something, a debate, I think that's going to always happen. I would love to see an a la carte menu, but just give us a price, right? Instead of saying this is $800 a user, that's $3,000 a user, just let us pick our elements, give us that price, and let us move on. I don't think we're going to ever get there from the design supplier world. My 2 cents.
And it's even an extension of the use case, because it's market driven. The technology is market driven, so we're asking for this. That's why this database doesn't give me this functionality. Oh, we'll create another database. You know, it won't link in these drawings. So we'll build something that does. It's like with standardization, like, you know, and I mean I'm a big advocate of standardization, but like we'd have 14 standards, you know, and then people say, well, this doesn't work. Like when you want interoperability, we want an API. It's great. Let's build another one. Now we have 15 standards.
You all need to come and talk to us.
So we won't solve it in the next 52 seconds.
I think in the last couple of minutes, governments got away with not taking any blame here. I would argue that it's much more the fault of governments why we're in the situation we are. You know, the way things work, so for example, BIM mandates, they first go to the public sector and the private sector follows. So if we're not doing IP, like integrated project contracts on a government level, what are we doing? You know, like the state is not getting good value for their construction projects at the moment. We've got a couple of really good examples in Ireland.
Can't imagine what you're talking about.
I wouldn't have a clue. But, you know, if we're not doing value-based contracts, then I say for-profit software companies, do whatever you want. It's not their problem. They're just making money. But this is state stuff, really, I think.
Okay. So I want to... Do you have a question? Yeah, perfect.
Hi, it's more of an observation, really, but just interested to hear people's thoughts on it. I suppose, so I should say I'm a client's information manager, but work for architects. So very interested to hear what you were talking about in terms of the building performance and collecting data as evidence. I'm just wondering, you know, how do we persuade the industry that we do need to be collecting data to give us evidence to show, you know, how can we create net zero buildings? How do we get there? Because, you know, there's a massive performance gap in the industry at the moment. There was a CIBSE report, like buildings using 40 times the amount of data there. It's just mad figures. How do we, you know, it's horrific. And if we start collecting data, that's going to really shake up the industry, because it's just going to show that buildings aren't working. It's going to flag up all the issues. So I'm just interested to hear what you think on how we kind of persuade clients, the wider industry, that that's the way we need to go. Because I totally agree with you, it is, but it's, yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting point, and one that's always been a problem, but I think we're seeing it unfolding a bit from the funders and investors element from ESG, in that they are crying out for investment. They know that we're moving to a low-carbon economy from a carbon-based economy. They've got to see the value of their assets maintained and retained, and it's only going to be retained if they can demonstrate low-carbon performance and low-emissions performance. And so what we're seeing as a consultancy firm is drivers from in fact, we've set up our own ESG department to help deliver this to clients, because they do want to see that data. Otherwise, they're not happy about their investment. They can't validate their investment for the long term for their property portfolios. So I think we are seeing it driven from different directions at the moment.
So from clients and funders from that side, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I think, just to add to that, it's being driven through existing buildings now, but that will be a fresh flow of data that informs future design. And it's a massive challenge getting that data historically out of existing buildings. The incentive hasn't been there, but now it is. So again, net zero is the driver behind all of this smartness. That becomes our evidence base, because suddenly you've got to have that data in hand. I think the slight issue then is, well, it's all very well having, I want the data in my building in order to achieve those outcomes over time. I'm not that happy about giving that data to you in order to, do whatever you want with it as an engineering firm or as a design firm or as an architect. So we've got work to do to make that transaction worthwhile for all parties. And I think one of the conclusions we're starting to draw is perhaps that data is most valuable to us as designers than any other party involved, and we probably therefore need to set ourselves up accordingly.
Yeah, and I think the ugly truth is, you just tell the client it's going to cost them money. You say the bottom line is money, loss of revenue. if you don't instrument absolutely everything in the environment in terms of digital twins, that everybody else will be doing it. They'll have optimizations and performance enhancements, and you'll be left behind. So you'll no longer be able to compete. It's a simple truth.
I mean, I have a practical example where I was trying to put some fault detection rules into a building of the company I worked for, right, in America. And I used to be in the real estate department, so I was like, this is really easy. I was doing an innovation project. I know these guys are going to let me in here with this brilliant idea we have. And when I approached them, they were like, oh, I don't think so. Get lost, there's the door, not a chance. And I'm going, no, but I'm your friend. They were like, no, not at all. So we had to really convince them. And in the end, this was a big multinational company I worked for. The CEO at the time mandated this was put in to try it, to see if it worked. And these guys, these engineers, these operations guys were petrified that we were going to show their dirty linen, that we were going to, like, out them, if you like, that we were going to run this fault detection across the BMS, and we were going to show that they weren't operating the building properly. They got experts in to say, oh, you're not going to save us any money here. The experts say, we maintain this building so well, you're not going to see anything. But at an asset level, we were saving 20% on energy and about 40% on operational costs because we could just identify a fault as it was happening. This wasn't predictive, this was just as maintained. So once they got into it, and then once they realized they could write their own rules, and then they could be the star of the show, and we stepped back, they loved it. So it's just about bringing hearts and minds and, trying to convince people that you're not trying to out them, that this is about progress. This is about getting away from your clipboard and your Excel spreadsheet and about, like, running automation and making life easier, That's a practical example. And, of course, they're all men, so you know what men are like. I think with that, time's up. It's been for ages. So what I'm going to ask is, in one word, everybody, what would you change about the industry if you could? If you had your biggest wish? Alice, no pressure, first up. One word, yeah.
Listen. I'm just going to go with that.
Collaborate for me.
Oh, yeah, Fab.
Tricky one. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to use 3 words. Take a risk.
Oh, like it. Yeah. Love it.
Instrument.
Oh.
So measure.
I'm afraid mine's 3 words. It's shared risk liability across the whole of the delivery chain. Shared risk liability. I can't count. I never have been able to count.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Big round of applause, everybody. Thank you.